Thank you. Hey. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh. There we go. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Jozef Youssef. As you can tell, I'm a chef rather than just coming out with a fashion statement. I'm the head of Kitchen Theory. We're an experimental gastronomy design studio based here in London, and there are two parts to our work, really. One is research that we conduct with Oxford University, looking into multi-sensory flavor perception. That's how you perceive flavor in the brain. Many of you will have heard from the professor that we collaborate with, Professor Charles Spence. I believe he spoke to you last year. The other part of our work focuses on gastronomy and culinary research. Now, up until about a year ago, I didn't know that such thing as an International Egg Confederation existed. And as a chef, let me tell you, when I heard about this, I was very excited. And when I heard that you wanted me to come here and do a demo and talk about eggs, well, I thought that was even more exciting. And the reason it's exciting for me is because when I kind of delved a little deeper and asked a little bit about what it is that you talk about, what it is that you do at your conferences, I found out that very little has to do with cooking. But that's what you're in the business of. Surely your product has served, millions and millions and billions of people all over the world for centuries and centuries. And I want to very much talk to you about some of the kind of very interesting, kind of more modernist or more, let's say, modern day, up-to-date kind of egg cooking techniques that we have kind of come across over the years. But to do this, I felt it's only right that we start by talking about the past, the history of eggs. So what I have here, ladies and gentlemen, show of hands for anyone who knows what this is. Right, this is an Orphic egg. It comes from ancient Greeks. Now, the ancient Greeks considered any other civilization that couldn't use food as medicine to be ignorant. And that tells you something about our society today. However, I digress. The point is, the ancient Greeks considered eggs to be almost the beginning of life on Earth. It was the primordial egg where the first god was hatched from, and then from there, he created all the other gods. It's the importance of eggs in these ancient cultures that we keep coming across. First century Rome, we find that there's the first published recipe for an omelette, a honey omelette. And this was quite kind of strange, but the first century Roman gourmand, Apicius, he had noted, he talked about eating boiled eggs, fried eggs, and what were known as kind of soft eggs. And by medieval times, the French had already mastered the art of egg cooking, of omelettes, sorry. And so eggs are very much in the history of us as chefs in gastronomy. And we even see here in art depictions, whether it's in kind of ancient Rome or whether it's in ancient China, this idea that eggs are in some way important, and what they symbolize, the symbolism behind them is extremely important when it comes to the beginnings of life. Now, talking about ancient civilizations, the whole idea of the yin and yang, again, this was the idea of the kind of white male energy being the egg white, and the kind of dark female yin energy being the egg yolk, and how it was all kind of held together in this one shell. And I have to tell you about this because I found this very important. The yin and yang being combined represented wisdom, truth, purity, propriety, and kindness, making the egg the food of 5 virtues. I thought that's incredible. We think of eggs as being something so commonplace these days that we forget how in history, how highly revered they were. And maybe that's one of the reasons why eggs are one of those staple foods that we find in ancient history cookbooks, and we still find prevalent and very, very relevant in today's world of gastronomy. And maybe it has something to do with the importance that we once kind of saw, or how we revered eggs in some way. And then we come to the 19th century, and this is where some of you may have heard of Antoine Marie Carême. Antoine Marie Carême is considered the chef of kings and the king of chefs. He was the chef for the Prince Regent, who was George V here in the UK, and he was also the chef for the Rothschilds in Paris, the big banking family in the 19th century. And what he was most notable for were these beautiful kind of ornate centerpieces that he would create for these lavish banquets. And many of them actually were kind of only semi-edible. They'd have edible things coming off of them, but a lot of them were made with icing, so egg white and sugar that he would use as almost like a cement to build these wonderful kind of structures. Antoine-Marie Carême was one of the first French chefs to really codify, like when we talk about things like bechamel sauce and espagnole and all these different kind of 5 mother sauces, these really came from Antoine-Marie Carême. He was the first person to really start codifying French cuisine. And what's interesting about this is he used eggs for crème brûlée. He used eggs for custards, for crème anglaise, for crème brûlée, and making omelets. And by the time, about the 19th century, there were already about 300 different known recipes for cooking eggs in France, in French kind of cuisine. And so you can see the importance that eggs have kind of held in gastronomy, in its kind of the foundings of what is French cuisine, which is one of the most kind of prolific gastronomy or cuisines that we have around the world. Now, one very interesting thing that Antoine-Marie Carême is noted for having done is having designed the humble toque, the chef's hat that we wear. Now, common bit of interesting trivia about this is that there are 100 folds in a toque. Why 100 folds? Because supposedly that represents the 100 ways which there are to cook an egg. Now, this may be true, it may be just myth and lore, but it's interesting that till today, this is still the kind of general association that chefs have, or the idea that goes behind it, that the idea of a toque represents in some way the way eggs should be cooked. And again, this gives it a very, very special place in gastronomy. So, moving on to 20th century, this is Escoffier. So Escoffier is most noted for his work at the Savoy and for having really taken Antoine-Marie Carême's work and having really codified French cuisine and really laid the path for what we identify as French cuisine today. Now, good old Escoffier had, in 1903, in his Guide Culinaire, which is this wonderful, sorry, we don't have his book up there. He had 143 recipes for cooking eggs in that, and Le Russe Gastronomique, which is till today still one of the most common kind of food and French Bibles of gastronomy that we have, has up to date about 43 recipes for cooking eggs alone. So again, you can see when I heard that there was an International Egg Confederation and that you guys would all be getting together here and talking about eggs, well, I thought that gastronomy was an extremely important subject for you to at least kind of touch on or maybe to think about. Now, we get to kind of almost more modern day kind of ideas. And this gentleman is Hervé Thies. Hervé Thies is a French chemist. He has worked with some of the top chefs around the world of our time. Molecular gastronomy, many of you may have heard of the term, it really is this notion of taking a more scientific approach to how we cook. So rather than just boiling an egg, it's about understanding the right cooking temperature and how to manipulate time and temperature. And Hervé Thies, some of his earliest research into, because molecular gastronomy now, when you read about it or when you hear about molecular chefs and molecular restaurants and all this, has become foams and espumas and crazy, wild kind of dishes that people put together. But essentially, Hervé Thies, till today, when he talks about molecular gastronomy, a lot of what he uses to demonstrate his principles are eggs. And one of the first bits of research that he did was looking at slow cooking eggs in sous vide, or rather than sous vide because that's with no air, but in water baths at a very controlled temperature. Like the eggs that we have now that I'm just going to slightly, could you just put them in there so we can warm them up? So the eggs that we have here, and this will make sense as to why I'm cooking eggs in a moment, but the eggs that we have here have been cooked at exactly 64 degrees. And what's interesting about this is this work has been taken even further. I can show you the egg, actually. Even better, I can show you the egg. So when you cook at 64 degrees, you get a very particular type of temperature, type of texture of the egg, which breaks beautifully like this, cooking the inside till you get this almost semi-cooked kind of texture, beautiful and rich, and is cooked all the way through. Delicious, isn't it? So, and let me show you now the next video to give you an idea on the actual texture itself. Look how bread, isn't that? Come on, a round of applause for eggs. Right. So, but the idea is when you understand the right cooking temperature and time, you can, as a chef, then manipulate exactly the outcome that you want of an egg and get the perfect texture to work with your dish. Now, this whole idea in general of taking a more kind of scientific approach towards eggs, if you look at Modernist Cuisine, they published a beautiful book that's out there. They took the time again to focus on a whole section on eggs, again, because eggs are so important. So even if you're talking about molecular gastronomy and some of the most forward-thinking chefs in the world, they have eggs on the mind in some way. And this kind of gives you this idea of when you cook eggs at different temperatures, it's teaching chefs how they can get the kind of perfect texture that they're looking for. So no longer do you have to go, and we've all experienced this. Back when I was kind of first playing around with these ideas, we're talking about 15 years ago. So things have come a long way in a very short time. Nowadays, you find slow-cooked eggs in every pub menu. Every gastro pub worth its salt has slow-cooked eggs of some type. And this is because this technology of water baths has filtered down quite quickly, and one of the first things that people look to cook in them are something like eggs. So kind of moving on from kind of where we were in the past to kind of more modern-day uses of eggs. Eggs are maybe very on trend in a way when it comes to things like being Instagrammable. When we look at kind of all these types of images, when we look at all the kind of brunch and lunch and all the kind of very food porny type of images that we find online, eggs feature there quite a bit. Professor Spence, who you heard from last year, has this idea of protein in motion. The fact that now, as we're in a digital age, and rather than just looking at static images, that we're more enticed, and advertisers are trying to entice their customers by having more kind of images of things like cheese running or egg yolks oozing. And it's this idea that we find that far more enticing than just kind of a still image. Like when we were watching that lovely piece of egg yolk being spread there. There's something quite delicious that taps into that idea. So eggs, again, even if we're talking about kind of current day, maybe brunch. Brunch seems extremely popular in the last kind of 15, 20 years, and we'll look at that in a moment. But even when we, as I said, fine dining, we're talking about some of the top chefs in the world. This is a dish from 11 Madison Park, and actually, funnily enough, one of our chefs that we work with just came back from there last week, and he had this very dish. So this is egg yolk with caviar, poached egg with caviar. And you might think, yeah, but that's quite a kind of tried and traditional technique. But obviously, when some of the top chefs in the world are applying these kind of techniques, they're doing it with their own little kind of twist on it. Here we have from Mugaritz, 2 Michelin. So the first dish, there was from 11 Madison Park in New York. That's got 3 Michelin stars and was last year rated the top restaurant in the world. Mugaritz, one of, again, the top 10 in the world, 2 Michelin stars. Here we have it with sea urchin, with uni, where they've slightly cured the eggs. And that's one of the techniques that we have done here, where we've slightly cured the eggs in miso for about 48 hours. Then we have these beautiful egg yolks, as you can see by that beautiful, vibrant texture, have been cooked at about 63 degrees. And then we've got a piece of cassava, which has been made to look like charcoal that's been sprinkled with it. And then we've got some of the kind of ash sprinkled there with it. Again, very innovative uses. You don't think of 3 Michelin star restaurants as particularly using eggs as being the protagonist of a dish. And this is the big difference, is that 20, 30 years ago when you found eggs on menus, you found them on the breakfast menu, the lunch menu, brunch, if that kind of existed. And that's where we found eggs. But now all of a sudden, with all these kind of new applications, techniques, and flavor pairings, we start finding that chefs are starting to use eggs as being the protagonist on a dish. And that's a very interesting concept, that something so humble is used in that way. Another beautiful dish by Mugaritz here, and then another dish that we're going to be testing out right now. This is beautiful in simplicity. So you could think, well, how much can you do to an egg, really? Well, sometimes it's not about how much you do to it, it's how little you do. So Eneco 3 Michelin star restaurant, Athurmendi, that's based in Bilbao, he took basically these beautiful egg yolks, and rather than just kind of cooking them or doing anything with them, he simply heated up some truffle jus, and he would inject the truffle jus into the egg yolk. There was slightly warmed the truffle jus, so it slightly warmed the egg yolk through, and then a little bit pinch of salt, and that was it. And it's the beauty and simplicity. It's one of the most Instagram dishes that he has. Like when you look up Eneco and Athurmendi, this is one of the kind of images that you get of his work. And again, simple. It's the humble egg elevated in a way through absolute simplicity. And some of the most incredible things have that form of simplicity. And then here we have Modernist Cuisine, again, the book that I was telling you about that did a whole chapter on eggs. And they've taken this idea of kind of an egg and mushroom omelet and reinvented it in a much more kind of modernist way. But again, all this is just giving us an indication that the fact that eggs now are no less of interest to chefs, are of no less culinary importance and significance to chefs. And what's interesting about this is now as chefs, we have ingredients from all over the world, more than we did 20, 30 years or 40 years ago. And what we're still more focused on, though, is choosing good, local, good quality products. And when it comes to eggs, I think this is something that chefs we're quite passionate about. We find we have a keen interest in. So brings us to this whole idea of brunch and the kind of rise in popularity of egg-based restaurants. So here I have Les Eggs, which is Barcelona's, what it claims to be the world's first fine dining egg restaurant. And so they're taking eggs very, very seriously and doing some very interesting things with it. And we see this kind of, again, this rise of, in London, we have Egg Slut, and you have quite a few now kind of brunchy, breakfasty, lunch-type places that are basing their whole concept around eggs. So again, it doesn't look like eggs are going anywhere too soon. If anything, as chefs, it seems like we seem to be kind of consuming more, finding more alternative and interesting uses for them. And so to the tasting part. Now, I have a very interesting little announcement here. Under 8 of your chairs, there are little green tickets, and these are people who are going to come and join us for a little tasting up here. So have a feel under your seat, and you should, 8 of you should find a little green card, and if you do find the little green card, please do come up and join us, please. And if it's not under your chair, if there's a free seat next to you, maybe check under that. If not, I'm simply going to go around and start. Oh, there you go, sir. Come on. Excellent. There we go. Yeah, we can start. Awesome. There we go. Fantastic. No, there's 7 others. There's 7 other shyer people than you, sir. Ah, there we go. Fantastic. They're all coming out of the woodwork now. Amazing. So, as we're... Oh, there's only 3. Come on, there must be another 5 of you. I'm going to start coming out and just put it. Ah, there we go. 3, 4, another 5 people. I'm going to start pointing at people randomly. Right. So we need 4 more people. Any volunteers? Oh, shy. There we go. Come on, sir. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Yeah, come on, sir. And oh, well, you 2 now have to come. There you go. Come on. Yeah. Perfect. So now there's 4 techniques that I would like our tasting panel here to try for us. Now, the first of these is this beautiful, what we talked about in Ecoacha, his egg yolk. We thought this is so beautiful and simple that we wanted to recreate this in some way. So what we've taken is to kind of modernize or update this or put our own kind of little take on it. What we're going to do is, first of all, have you got me there? Right, perfect. First, I'm going to make a very simple little hole in here. And then gently take out some of our egg yolk. Actually, Carlos, these ones are done. You could start just a pinch of salt, and we can start serving them. And then I'm going to take some of what we have here is some mushroom jus with soy. And then we're going to take this and simply inject it in here. Perfect. Little pinch of salt to boot. And there you go. So, very, very simple. As you can see, one of the most simple things ever. But what I'm waiting for is for our tasting panel to taste them and go, whoa, how amazing. So you know the reaction now. I've already primed you and prompted you, so, you know. And don't forget, these are eggs predominantly, so, you know. So, yeah, please go ahead. Yes, do try them. So these are egg yolks that we've enriched with a little bit of mushroom, and a little bit of and soy. So again, taking something very simple. And again, this is one of those classic kind of combinations. If you think of the whole idea of where in a coacha, can we go back to the other screen? Am I okay to do that? Perfect. And here we have a much more controlled video of this being done. But what's interesting about this is this whole idea of in kitchens, we've been using the combination of eggs and truffle for a long, long time. And even the idea of kind of eggs and mushrooms are a classic combination. All this is really doing is looking at how you can combine what are very familiar flavors to people and that people find comforting and familiar, but using them in completely different ways. Perfect. So the next thing that I would like us to take a look at here. Now, in modernist cuisine, we came across this very, very interesting technique. Could we just switch to this maybe so I can show people? Perfect. Oh, no. There we go. So we have these beautiful little egg pearls. And these are made, now if you could switch back to the other one, that would be amazing. And these are made using this technique. We could start serving these. Yeah. So here there's oil that has been warmed to 2 different temperatures, and it's very important that you have a different temperature for the egg yolk and a different temperature for the egg white as to when they coagulate. We bring the temperature to about 80 degrees, and then the egg yolk are dropped in, and you create these beautiful little delicate pearls. And so rather than just kind of having a boiled egg and then separating the egg and the white, chopping it up and making a gribiche, let's say, a gribiche being quite a traditional, again, French condiment with eggs and cornichons and mustard and so on, we've created something very similar, but we've done it with these lovely little egg pearls that we have here. So please do, yes, please. So we've served these with some asparagus. And again, we've cooked the asparagus in sous vide, and these techniques are becoming more and more, again, common, this idea of taking eggs and applying kind of different temperatures and cooking techniques to them to get slightly different results. What are we saying? Good? Excellent. So, and then the next thing that I would like to show you is these, oh, and this is what you already have there on the piece of toast, so I should address this now. I already talked about this idea of curing egg yolks in miso. And so here we make a mixture of miso, soy sauce, mirin, miso, mirin, and sugar, and then we bury the egg yolks into this. After about 24 hours, we flip them around. And what we end up with are these beautiful, full of flavor, because the fat from the yolk absorbs all the flavor from the miso. And what you end up with, and how we've prepared it for you here, is we've then cured it a little more and shaven it, like botarga, like the dried fish egg that you can shave onto your omelette or your eggs or something like that. And that's exactly what we've done here. And you get that very strong kind of miso-y flavor, a very nice kind of cured flavor. Perfect, yeah. And then finally, what Carlos, and I should probably come around and help Carlos with doing, is the eggs that we cooked at 64 degrees, we're now taking these and we're going to put them with some romesco sauce. And as you can see, these are beautifully cooked. The amazing thing about cooking eggs in this way, and why a lot of restaurants love slow cooking eggs in this way, is you get exactly the same result each and every time you do it. It's one of the most consistent ways that you can cook eggs. Many hotels and breakfast chefs now rely on this for their poached eggs to get the perfect result. Fantastic. And we thought it's a bit boring if we turned up and we didn't have at least some smoke or some bit of a show. So, you know, what we're going to do now with these beautiful eggs is we're going to smoke them. Yeah. It's good. It really is. I wouldn't be serving it if it wasn't. Okay, so, perfect. So what I'm doing now, you may wonder what this contraption is. What I have here is known as a smoking gun. And what I've done is I've put some little, what are these, hickory chips, some hickory smoke chips, and what we're going to do is simply smoke the eggs. There, ooh, there we go. Yes, 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 yes. That's it. Perfect. Next one. Perfect. Next. Perfect. Very good. Because if it all went wrong, I was going to disappear in the smoke. That was my plan. That's it. A bit more. Perfect. So, there we go. Perfect. So, now a little molten salt. Perfect. Let's go. Ta-da! So, because as a chef, the first thing you want to do is feed people. And so I thought, I can't come here and talk to you about eggs and not at least have fed someone. I would love to have fed all of you, but you can imagine how Carlos and I would have been sweating had we had to do this for all of you. So, now we look at this kind of idea. So I should explain. What you have here is romesco sauce, which is tomato with some chili and some almonds, and that's matched with the egg, which has been cooked at 64 degrees, smoked slightly, so I hope you enjoy. And again, another amazing thing about eggs. So I was asked not too long ago to write a report for one of the large kind of multinational companies that was looking at 10 of the most essential ingredients that you have to have in the kitchen. And eggs was obviously featured very high up on that list. And one of the main reasons as well being eggs, because of the fattiness of the egg yolk, what you'll kind of experience there, and with the miso, it absorbs and takes on flavors in such an amazing way that it makes it great for applications like this. Sorry. So, eggs and the future. Well, you know, eggs are gluten-free, full of protein, and dairy-free, right? I mean, in today's world as a chef, that's God's gift. Because, I'm being quite serious here, because I started off in this game probably about 15 years ago, and all you had then was the odd vegetarian and every now and again the occasional peanut allergy. Nowadays, however, there are many, many more allergies, and there are many more intolerances. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for joining us. Thank you. I'll let you sit down rather than, thank you. Thank you. Now, what's interesting is that in today's world, you know, even up until about 5 to 10 years ago, chefs were still being a bit dismissive over things like dietaries and allergies and intolerances. But nowadays, because of legislation and because it's becoming a much more important issue within our industry, chefs are constantly looking for ingredients that tick many boxes. In fact, many products, so you look at things like, let's say, corn tortillas. Corn tortillas 10 years ago were corn tortillas. Corn tortillas now are what? Gluten-free. And it's this idea that they've just been rebranded in a way for what they always were, but they've now found a new way of kind of channeling that kind of going based on a trend. They found new markets for it. And in a way, I think there must be a huge potential with egg-based products because it ticks so many of these kind of major boxes. So perhaps, again, looking at all the advancements that we've made with eggs in the kitchen, all the new technologies that we have, surely there are ways of capitalizing on finding new ways of either selling eggs, presenting them in some way. One idea that Carlos is going to hate me mentioning because he thinks someone might steal it, and I'm probably in the wrong room for this, is, what was it? So, Carlos, did you see the eggs that we just cracked there? Were they not beautiful? Yeah. Would you not love to be able to do that at home? Well, what if you sold eggs that were cooked at 64 degrees? All you had to do is drop them in boiling water for 30 seconds to a minute and then crack them open, and you've got the perfect poached egg each and every time. Again, it's just an idea of something that it's not reinventing the egg, but it's just something really simple that most people who try cooking poached eggs at home, and I know this from my wife's own experience, fail miserably time and time again. So maybe the future of it isn't kind of reinventing a process as much as it is just kind of rethinking the simple egg. And then the future of egg. As I said, myself at Kitchen Theory, a lot of our work and research is focused on this idea that we perceive flavor and taste in the brain, that we use all of our senses to really give us and to paint a congruent picture of what we perceive to be flavor. And so maybe if we think about eggs in a different way and we look at maybe the shape of eggs or the way in which we present them, again, all the different kind of, what is it that we can kind of look at? What are the sensory aspects of how people interact and use eggs? One of the main things that struck me is the idea of packaging. Now, I know packaging is probably very much designed on what is efficient, what is safe, what is clean, what is healthy, and probably has to tick many boxes. But are there other things that we could do with packaging, like so many other industries are looking at, that in some way, maybe we're talking about, okay, what are people's biggest concerns with eggs? Maybe we're talking about things like locality, freshness, a few other kind of themes around that kind of notion. How could we reflect some of these principles in packaging? Through maybe the feel, through maybe the sounds, the sound of the box as it pops open, or any of the other kind of sensory touch points. I may be talking complete gibberish, or there may be $1 million idea in there. You never know. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've given you a bit of an idea on why, as chefs, we're so excited about eggs, and why I hope you, as the people who supply us with our eggs, I hope you are now a little bit more excited to find out that as an end user, we are very excited and still championing new ideas with eggs. Thank you ever so much. It's been a pleasure. Let's go. Yeah. Thank you.